Welcome, Legionnaires, to the Long Live the Legion podcast, where we talk about the Legion of Superheroes comic book team and break subjects down so that whether you're just out of the Legion Academy or you're a longtime veteran, you know the team a little bit better. I'm your co-host, Jim.
I'm your co-host, Jay.
And welcome to episode 11. And Jay, I have I have two questions for you.
Okay.
First question is, what do we have on the mission monitor board? And the second question is, can we do this in under an hour?
All right. So I'll answer the second question first. Maybe. And so just a little bit of sort of behind the scenes for all the fans. When we first started doing this, we were thinking, okay, we'll do half an hour, maybe 40 minutes. And then with each week, because we have these big topics, we end up just talking and talking and talking. And for us, it's great because this is something we're really excited about, but we're trying our best. So let's see how we do. To answer your first question, I'm really excited today because we get to talk about Lightning Lad or Livewire, depending on when you became a Legion fan. So we're going to spend our episode putting the spotlight onto Lightning Lad.
And Lightning Lad would be the third of our three founders of the actual Legion of Superheroes.
Exactly. So he was one of the big three. We can say the Trinity of the Legion. I think we can steal Trinity from because it's a DC thing. Along with Saturn Girl and Cosmic Boy, those were the three who created the Legion, along with R.J. Brand. Although he wasn't actually Lightning Lad in the beginning, his first appearance, He was Lightning Boy.
Lightning Boy.
And then I think they realized, as with most DC characters in the Silver Age, alliteration is best. So he became Lightning Lad. So would you like to give just a little bit of a background of who Lightning Lad is and what do we need to know about him?
Okay, so it really comes down to two basic things at a fundamental level. So Lightning Lad is Garth Ranzz. So he's this redheaded kid from the planet Winath, which is a farm planet. And he has the power of lightning projection. So he can zap stuff. So it's very, very cool power. All the really good superheroes have, there's always somebody that has a lightning casting power, which is really cool. And in the Legion universe, there's actually three because he has two siblings. The oldest of which is Garth Ranzz, and that person, he's a villain called Lightning Lord. So that's the older brother. But then he also has a twin, Ayla Ranzz, who is his twin sister, obviously. And she is known by various names depending on where in a continuity you're talking about. So she's both Lightning Lass, so a female version of Lightning Lad, as well as Light Lass, because at one point she had a power to make things lighter versus being another electrical caster. And then she's also been called Spark in the reboot Legion of Superheroes as well.
And she was also Gossamer for a
That's right.
hot
Gossamer
second.
Was the other name. That's right.
Which I thought was just horrible, but that's why it sticks out in my mind. So one thing is with Garth and Ayla, they are twins, and part of the whole story of Lightning Lad, Lightning Lass, and Lightning Lord is the idea that Garth and Ayla are twins, so they have this bond, they have this connection. And on Winath, the planet that they're from, twins are the most common thing. So most people are twins, but then Mecht, the older brother, he didn't have a twin. He was a single or a solo. And for many years of Legion history, that's been the reason why he's been the bad guy. It's either he's been jealous, or it made him crazy, or it gave him a reason to want to unalive himself. They've done all of these different things. And then another big key to Lightning Lad is how he got his powers. And I think I can pretty safely say that they have showed Lightning Lad's origins more than any other Legion of Superhero member, and maybe more than almost any superhero created, I'll say, after 1955. Does that sound like a stretch?
I mean, it almost rivals the amount of times that they've shown Batman and Superman's origins at various points in time. I mean, it's really crazy how many times we've seen it and in how many varieties that we've seen this as well, right?
Yeah. And so at its basis, The three of them are flying around in a spaceship. Mech is driving. They crash land on this planet, Korbal, where there are these lightning beasts. And they realize that their ship has no energy, so they think, hey, if we can get these beasts to come over, zap our ship, we'll have energy, and then we can fly away. Instead of the ship getting zapped, they get zapped. Again, depending which reboot we're talking about, they're either kind of perfectly fine, or they fall unconscious, or they're actually really badly hurt, but they end up with superpowers. Mech then disappears, which is the whole reason why Garth ends up on Earth to form the Legion, because he's searching for his older brother.
That's right. And it should be noted that this actual origin evolves over time, right? So I think the original origin, it just had the two of them, and then of course you have the third, the next variation where you have Ayla in the mix as well, because since she had to have these same powers, but she was not around when they first created these reasons for his powers. So it's very interesting to see from a comics uh, evolution standpoint, right? You get to see where they were thinking originally, and then they're just adding more characters to the mix, so they're just kind of evolving the backstory a little bit more every time. And I think we're kind of at a I guess a standard situation now, since you have these three established characters. They're all three of them are there for this particular origin.
Yep. Now, I always have one question with Garth and Ayla, because I've seen both sides of this, and I always like to ask people what their opinion is. Are they identical twins, or are they fraternal twins?
I think they have to be fraternal since they're boy girl. Is that correct? I mean, that's the only way you can get a different sex or different gender twins, as I understand it. I could be completely wrong about that, because I thought identical had to be the same, male male or female female.
So I don't know the answer to that, but I always go back to they have to be identical if the storyline, and we'll talk about all of the crazy stories that surround them. At one point, Lightning Lad dies, and Ayla pretends to be him. So actually shows up, puts on his costume, and says that she's Lightning Lad. So I always go, well, then they have to be identical. Because she's literally the only reason they figure out that she's not Garth is she doesn't have an Adam's apple.
Yeah, which is okay.
It's the 60s, right? It's Silver Age. And so I always go with they're identical. And again, I don't know the science behind this. I'm sorry, I didn't look up twins. I'm sure we'll get a bunch of emails and comments.
I don't think the science works that way, but hey, mumbo jumbo sci-fi comics. So,
Exactly. So, and it's a bizarrely strange story anyways. So as I did mention, Lightning Lad died. And so this kind of gets into, Lightning Lad has been called the most unlucky Legionnaire ever. And they actually did an entire comic about this. I always make the point that, and we've talked about this on podcasts before, and I've mentioned this in some of my articles, are there characters that the writers actually hate? And I think you could make a really strong case that Lightning Lad is the most hated Legionnaire from the creative team side. And again, we'll go through sort of all of these things that happen to him. So yes, he's one of the first members and he joins the team, but then he's the first Legionnaire to die. And he dies back in the beginning of 1963. He gets, I think he gets zapped. I'm going to blank out on this, of course.
Yeah, so actually, there's a really good website to for anybody who wants to track all this stuff, and maybe we could put this in the show notes. If you go to there's a website called the Legion of Super Bloggers, and hopefully those folks are listening to us. They haven't really updated anything in the last few years because there hasn't been much Legion in the last few years, but they did a lot of breakdowns of all the characters and lots of the storylines and stuff like that. It's a great resource to check out. So legionofsuperbloggers.blogspot.com. Check it out. In Adventure Comics 304, according to the site here, Livewire. Here we go. This is going to be one of those episodes where we're going to be having name roulette all day. Lightning Lad is going up against a character named Zarion the Conqueror, and basically saves Saturn Girl from death. And so Saturn Girl then retrieves his body, and he dies. Basically, is kind of the way that works.
And what's crazy about that story is the whole first half of the story is focused entirely on Saturn Girl, as she is basically tricking everyone or using her powers to make sure she ends up as the Legion leader, because she finds out that the leader that some Legionnaire is going to die in the future. So she tries to make sure that she's the one who's going to be in this dangerous spot. So she's going to die. And then at the very last second, Lightning Lad flies in, ends up getting killed. And so like he doesn't even really get like the focus of this. Like, so he dies, but Saturn Girl's more the person who we kind of spend more time around in the story. And then for the next 7 months, 8 months, he's in a glass coffin that they keep going to see, and it's like, hey, Lightning Lad's dead. And then they figure out get him back to. This is one of the craziest Silver Age stories. Adventure Comics 312. They all stand around the coffin. They all have lightning rods that they're holding up, and whoever gets zapped with the lightning rod, the power of, or like the lightning will go through their body, as will their life force. So Lightning Lad will come back to life, but that Legionnaire will die.
Of course, what happens in the end is that so there's another character ish, and of course, adjacent to the Legion of Superheroes and the Legion of Substitute Heroes, there is the Legion of Super Pets. And one of these pets is this blob of protoplasm called Prody, and that is Lightning Lad. Here we go. Chameleon Lad's pet. And for whatever reason, and it's not really explained why, but this Prody is for some reason very devoted to Saturn Girl. And we'll follow up on this later. And Prody effectively takes Saturn Girl's place and is the character that gets zapped to sacrifice for Lightning Lad.
So Lightning Lad's back to life, and then and you think everything's good, we're cool, no problem. We kind of last, I'll say another year and a half maybe, and then Lightning Lad loses his right arm as a big space monster. I believe he's called the Moby Dick of space.
The super Moby Dick of space, Jay. Come on, it's the super Moby.
And he gets a robot arm.
Yes.
And so this has also become kind of canon for the Legion, right? So Lightning Lad being killed, that's canon. Lightning Lad losing his right arm, that's canon. And we saw that in the reboot as well. So now he's flying around with a metal arm, which actually was kind of I think it was an interesting take, and I didn't actually mind it because it was a little bit more sci-fi.
Yeah, and actually, and to bring it around to all of the Legion iterations, Lightning Lad actually has a fake arm or a robotic arm in the animated show as well.
There we go. So that gives me a reason now to watch the animated show.
Definitely something that is kind of ingrained in the lore. Although it is only in the second season. So the first season of the animated show, he has both limbs normally. And the second season is when he has the robotic arm.
So again, we think things are good, and then we get a new villain called Starfinger, but Starfinger isn't actually a new villain. He's Lightning Lad, but being mind controlled. So he's still just getting kicked while he's down. Hey, we've killed you. We've taken away your arm. Now we've turned you into a villain. And that's kind of the 60s. Like every time he shows up, it's just, you're kind of like waiting for something bad to happen to him. The only good thing, sorry.
I was just going to say, he certainly seems to be a punching bag in the Silver Age for sure.
Oh yeah, and the only good thing is there's it's issue 351. He gets his arm back, but it's actually off panel. He just walks in and they said, "Yeah, we regrew your arm," and then we're done, and everything's good again. And he kind of just floats through everything, and things are good. And we get to the end of the Silver. I don't think Jim Shooter was really interested in Lightning Lad, so he kind of just disappears at that point.
Yeah.
And then we think things are good, like everybody's happy, like no problem. And then they kill his parents in Superboy and the Legion 207. Just for no reason. It's like, all right, now we're gonna kill your parents. And I'm like, why? Why are you doing this to this guy? What else
They
does
had
he
to make him
need?
dark and gritty, you know, give him
Except
that
it's the early
Batman kind of
70s, right?
origin.
So there's no dark and gritty. No, instead they had him quit the team. Now, here's the one moment where we actually get a bit of happiness. And we actually get a good thing happening to him. And we've talked about this when we talked about Saturn Girl, and we've talked about the most important relationships in Legion history. And one of them is Lightning Lad and Saturn Girl, and they're always connected. I've said before, I think they should just be one of those canonical couples in the Legion.
Yeah. Mhm.
And so
I agree.
in the 1970s, they produced this. It's called like I think it's the all new collector's edition, and DC was pumping these out, and they're these big magazine stand, extra size, extra large specials. So if you've ever seen like Superman versus Muhammad Ali, it's from that run. And so Paul Levitz and Mike Grell put together this book, and basically the whole point of the book is Lightning Lad and Saturn Girl get married, and because according to Legion bylaws you can't have any married members, they have to quit the team.
Yeah, exactly right. And it's a fun issue, honestly. I mean, it's also something that was re-released in hardback. I want to say about 2 or 3 years ago, so you can probably find it online and snag a copy. But you can also just, if you have the DC app, you can absolutely just read it today, right? If you wanted to, it's fun. It's a fun little story, and in a lot of ways, I think it's great. I mean, Lightning Lad is very long suffering, has a lot of stuff happen to him, but he gets Saturn Girl as his spouse and partner. I think it's a not too bad of a trade. And he does get his arm back eventually, even though we don't care about the details.
Yeah, I mean, by the early 70s, he's got his arm back. He's in great shape. There's one issue, and I'm going to blank on it. It came out right along at the same time as when they get married, and Grell basically shows Lightning Lad and Saturn Girl in this romantic setting as they're trying to decide, do we get married and leave the team? And I mean, he just looks genuinely happy. Like if you had said that's the end for these two characters, I think everybody would have been happy. Like it was a nice way for these two to leave the team. But of course, they're two of the three founding members, so they can't really go anywhere. So when Earth War pops up, they all come back and they immediately rejoin. And now Lightning Lad is ready to get kicked again. But before he does, he actually ends up getting elected leader. Like the fans, I think, were like, we miss this guy. We like him. And this was back when fans were writing in to vote for Legion leader. So he ends up Legion leader, and he actually ends up having one of the longer runs as Legion leader. And I don't know if that's because they just liked writing him, or if it was because this was the same time when Jerry Conway and Roy Thomas took over and they didn't care.
Yeah,
About
I
all of
think
that.
that's it. I think it's a mixture of both of what you're talking about. I think it's the fact that they couldn't really care less, but also when you look at those issues as over time, and I think this is more when Paul Levitt starts to get back involved in the book. But Garth isn't that great of a leader. He gets very frustrated and eventually just says, "You know what? I'm done with this job." so, I one of the things that they kind of push as a narrative is the fact that he's a little bit brash, and it makes sense, right? He's it's reflective of his powers, but also he's not the natural leader that both Imra or Cosmic Boy are, right?
But then, I mean, this is the one thing that always throws me when we talk about the OG Legion is they actually never showed Cosmic Boy as a great leader. Like his leadership was so short, and we didn't really get to see it. So it's more like this. It's more Saturn Girl as the great leader, or who else would you say was? I mean, Mon-El did it a couple of times, but yeah, I mean, so I'll push back a little bit. I thought he did okay when it was Conway and when it was Thomas writing. I think Levitz decided, let's get him out of this spot because we wanted a little bit more drama.
Yeah, no, I wouldn't necessarily disagree with that too much, for sure.
So yeah, but it's I mean, and ironically enough, I think it when he becomes leader, that might be when he gets the most positive attention of the entire
Yeah,
OG
totally,
Legion, which is kind of
totally.
funny. But I think there's that as well. Now, after that, they have their first they get pregnant, or well, Saturn Girl gets pregnant. I always love when they say they get pregnant, and I'm like, well, he's not really pregnant at all.
It would be interesting,
And
but yeah.
yeah, so I mean, I guess we don't know what Winathian
Yeah, it could be like Arnold
physiology looks like.
Schwarzenegger and Danny DeVito in Twins, right?
Exactly,
Oh no, that
exactly.
was was that the right movie? I can't remember. Anyway,
Nope, no, it wasn't twins. It was Junior. No, oh God, yeah, Junior. Schwarzenegger and Danny DeVito, and then Emma Thompson.
oh my god.
Yeah, Junior. Yeah.
Anyway,
So
sorry about that. I don't know how I got onto that.
no, it's okay. And then
Finally.
unfortunately did this to person who remembers too much about old movies that he shouldn't. Okay. So she ends up pregnant. She has her twins, and then of course they can't just be happy with their twins. One of them gets kidnapped by Darkseid. But what's the important part there is they resign, and he walks away, and he actually just says like, "I'm out. Like I don't need to be a Legionnaire anymore. I'm cool just being dad."
Yeah, which is awesome. But let's go back to a certain point though, because I think we had made the same point when we talked about Saturn Girl, was that they had twins, but they didn't know it, which was kind of weird, given that Imra's a telepath. But one of them is stolen at birth, and nobody seemed to know it, right? By Darkseid, and so that's kind of where we are. So they're originally just raising the one baby.
Yeah. So they've got the one baby. I always pronounce this as Graham or Graham. Does that
Yeah,
work for
it's
you?
Graham.
Or
It's supposed to be a sci-fi spelling of Graham, right?
yeah, that's what I thought. Yeah, so he retires, he becomes dad, and then the storyline continues, and they end up getting their son back from Darkseid, and it is revealed that their son is actually Validus, the longtime Fatal Five member and killer of the original Invisible Kid. Uh,
Yeah.
and somehow, and then he gets de-evolved back to being a child, and now he's living with the family, and they now have twins. And they're kind of cool with this. It's like, all right, here's our twin son, and we'll forget the fact that he's a murderer. We'll raise him. And again, Lightning Lad's kind of cool. He gets one final sort of bit of attention when it's the Legion's 30th anniversary, and this is Legion Volume 3, issue number 45. It's an
Actually,
entire spotlight on Lightning Lad. And
well,
I would say
let's
that's,
hold on.
oh,
Let's
sorry.
hold off on that one here for a minute as
Oh,
well,
sure, sorry.
because one thing I do want to make sure we talk about is the Legionnaires 3 miniseries,
Sorry,
which
yes.
happens
Yep.
before
So
this,
please.
right? And so, to your point of, and then maybe this is a Paul Levitz thing, I don't know, but to your point of maybe Lightning Lad isn't as appreciated or liked as some of the other characters. The whole premise of the Legionnaires 3 story is to pit the Legion founders against the Time Trapper, and because the Time Trapper is very crazy, and is obsessed with defeating the Legion. He looks at the three founders. He determines that Lightning Lad, of the three of them, is the weakest link to undermine the Legion itself. And so, as part of that, he kidnaps Graham. And there's a whole thing of, of course, Imra and Garth are like, we got to get the kid, and Rock Kryn is of course, I'm going to help you. And so when you go through that story, right, it's Garth is the leverage for the Time Trapper to do what he wants to do to get the story progressing. And at the end of the day, it's not Garth that saves the day. It's really Cosmic Boy and Saturn Girl who save the day at the end of that story. So that happens. So I want to make sure that that's called out, because that is a fairly significant moment from a Legion Trinity perspective, right?
Yeah, I no, and I'm glad you pointed it out. I always forget about that miniseries just because I think I was irritated by the whole he's the weakest link and he never got the saving moment. Like the other two ended up saving him,
Yeah.
and I was like, like, can you not just give him something? And I think it was, and so I think that's why I kind of skip over it a little bit. So
Yeah,
I'm glad you put that out.
but it kind of helps underline the point that you're making about him, about how
Yeah,
he's perceived by the creators anyway at the time.
yeah, true, true. So it's okay. I'll go back to
So let's
the
yeah, so let's go
Legion's.
to the
Yeah, sure.
issue 45 of the
Yeah, nope,
Baxter
that's
run.
perfect. So when we talked about this, he gets the whole spotlight. The focus is basically the Luck Lords show up, and they revealed that it's now time for Lightning Lad to die. And because he's the unluckiest Legionnaire, and he's basically been surviving or he's had bad luck, but yet he's had good luck, and that's why he's still alive. I mean, look, the plot of this is mediocre at best. It kind of just exists to show all of these different points of Legion history and all of these different points of Lightning Lad's life. The one good part about the end is it shows that he's able to fight back, and he of course survives to the end, survives the issue, and he continues on. I will say this. It's a very weird issue when you go back and you reread the series because he's not a member of the team. He doesn't actually like nothing from this issue affects the series moving on. And so you kind of go like, well, why are you doing this throwaway about him?
Yeah, and it's funny. I mean, because at the time it was one of those anniversary issues that they were fond of doing in DC at the time. And my memory when I was thinking about the moments that we're talking about now for this episode, I had just made a mental shortcut that was an annual, because an annual are the kinds of times where you get these types of stories, right? But this is an actual issue in continuity in the run, but it reads like an annual.
Very true. Yeah, and I mean, there's some nice callback artwork, and it's a nice sort of trip down memory lane if you're a longtime Legion fan. But you're right, it does really feel like an annual, or it should have been like a special or something where they're like, this isn't connected. And I think that's one of the weird things about when a lot of writers deal with Lightning Lad is they kind of feel like they have to put him in there, but they don't want to do anything else with him. Which kind of comes back to my whole point of like, you get the sense that they don't really like him, or they don't know what to do with him, which I think is a problem.
It's probably more that one, because when you think about it, at this point in time of issue 45 of the Baxter run, at this point Saturn Girl had returned to the Legion, right? Because she returned after the Universo project, right? And now she's the working mom. Garth is sitting at home raising the kids. So it was probably more hey, you know what? There's this Lightning Lad guy. We just need to make sure that everybody knows that he exists. And let's have this story. But it is what it is.
Very true. And then he's gone for the rest of the Levitz run.
Pretty much, yeah.
So I will say this: if you like Lightning Lad as a character, if you're coming into this as a fan of Lightning Lad, do not read 5 years later. Just don't read any of it. I kind of don't want to go over all.
If you're a fan of Brody, you're gonna love it.
Well, I actually don't even like think about 5 years later. So he's introduced. He's now injured, like permanently disabled, walking with a cane. So he can't even go back and help Cosmic Boy like rebuild the Legion. So he's stuck running his farm, and they kind of just push him right to the background. I mean, even Saturn Girl gets a little bit more to do. Now they do have another set of twins, Daisy and Dorit, so he's a family man or whatever. But it's like they basically just said like he doesn't matter in the least, and we are, and it's one of you usually go like, wow, like okay, so even these guys hate him. And then there's what you mentioned with Prody. Do you want to talk about this horror, or do you want me to?
You know what? I haven't even been drinking yet, so I don't know.
Okay, so
I'll give it a shot, and then you can
Okay.
fill it in as needed here. Um, so one of the oh gosh, where do I start? So this all kind of begins in the fandom circles of the intro. I think it was the Interlac uh, uh, magazine or the newsletter, whatever they were creating at the time. And folks would, instead of having email message boards like we do today or these apps, we would send messages to each other via snail mail, and a lot of times fanzines would be created that would, people would write their own articles about certain things and have their ideas and all that stuff. And so one of these ideas was that uh, Lightning Lad, when he was revived and resurrected, when Prody sacrificed himself, Garth actually never came back. What happened was the soul of Prody merged into Garth's body, and so it's basically been Prody wearing Garth's skin this whole time. That we've all been reading about, and it was because Prody was so in love with Saturn Girl that's why everything is what it is. Okay, I think I'm feeling ill. Is it hot in here?
Yeah,
No.
there is not enough alcohol in my room to get past this. So forget about the whole, like, there are certain fan theories that just should stay as fan theories, and forget about that. What this essentially did is, with one move, they basically told you that Lightning Lad hasn't been Lightning Lad, but has in fact been lying to his teammates for, well, in comic book years, like 10, 15 years. In comic, like in real world, 30 years. Right? That this has been wrong. And then the second one is, it basically said, because Saturn Girl is a telepath, she's known this the entire time and she's been cool with it.
Yeah.
And so as anybody who is a fan of the book and as a fan of, and I'll just be honest here, like, I am a Lightning Lad fan. I like Lightning Lad as a character, even with the fact that he keeps, like, all of his stories tend to be him getting kicked when he's down. I've been just a fan of what of a lot of the stories where they're not kicking him when he's down, and he's always been a Legionnaire that stood out to me. So reading this, I mean, Punch to the Gut doesn't really cover it. I remember reading this issue, buying this, coming home and going, like, this is a WTF moment of the hot, like, you're just like, what? And because I didn't know about all this Interact fan board stuff. I just read the comics. So this came out of nowhere. And, it's a punch to the gut combined with a slap across the face, combined with a, kick in the nards. Like, it's just...
Well, let's talk about, well, for one thing, when I read that, so as I've said before on the podcast, I started with the reboot Legion, so I'm picking up all these other issues, like this story particularly, just ad hoc and as I could get them. So I didn't have I had no context about the Silver Age references, right? So I was totally out to lunch for a lot of this, and none of this made any sense to me. So I'll just put that there. But let's shift over just a bit and talk about the parallel evil that happens here at the same time, and that would be the clone SW6 Garth. So at the same time, during 5 years later, a run about the issue 20-ish time frame, a younger version of the Legion appears, and they're clones of some kind, right? There's the reasons of why they are clones is kind of explained in retcon, within 2 years of itself. But as a result, you see a young Lightning Lad / Garth Ranzz eventually comes to be called Livewire in this new version. So they're basically these younger teenager versions of the older, darker, grittier Legion that we've been reading about in the 5 years later Legion. This particular Garth is an asshole, and there's two reasons that they kind of give for it, and one of which is he's heavily influenced by Sunboy Inferno in this new revamped version, and who is also a jerk. And so Garth is portrayed as this kid who just kind of goes along with somebody who he perceives as a cool kid, not being a hero founder of the Legion, and is a jerk to other people, including Imra, who is supposedly his girlfriend. And so the reason, the kind of the sly reason that they're kind of going for here is that Garth is a jerk and would never have even gotten together with Saturn Girl unless it was for Prody, because Prody's the gentler, kinder soul that Imra always wanted. So, it just basically tells you that they hated Garth. In no uncertain terms, that they just did not like his character for whatever reason.
Yeah, and this is one of those where, to go back to 2 episodes back when we were talking about like the best Legion writers, and this is why I can never put the beer bombs on this list. For all the good stories that they did, it's these moments where I'm like, I'm just like, how can you hate these characters so much? Like, they literally had Livewire and Inferno bully a girl so badly that when she became the Emerald Empress, you felt sorry for the Emerald Empress.
Oh yeah, you wanted her to take out both Sunboy and Lightning and Livewire. I mean, it was,
Yeah, like,
you don't want to write your characters and put them in that position.
yeah, it was just, I just couldn't understand this. I couldn't fathom this. It's like, okay, you want to make him a bit of a jerk, or you want to, like we talked about this last episode with Wildfire, about how like sometimes he would get into like complete jerk territory. But even at his worst in the 70s, and I will admit there's some moments where you're just like, he never got to that point. Like, he was a jerk to Superboy a lot, which I kind of enjoyed, but he was never bullying people to the point where you felt sorry for the villain of the piece.
Yeah, I mean, right. It's the kind of scenario where, I don't want, if I'm teaching my kids how to behave, I'm not going to tell my kids that a proper way to behave is to make fun of somebody who looks different from you for, whether it's because of disability or just how their body type is, or whatever, right? It's you don't do that. And you're certainly not going to be a member of the Legion of Superheroes and do that kind of thing. It's just it really rubbed me the wrong way.
Oh, and definitely, like, I think that's a great point. The idea that, how is this person a member of the Legion of Superheroes? How are they letting this go? Like, these are supposed to be heroes that we're supposed to look up to. That's why we read superhero mix. Like, I mean, we don't. I've joked about this a lot when I talk about how certain books, you kind of feel like they're trying to turn the team into, say, like the Authority, or into especially when the Ellis run, when the Warren Ellis run was at its peak, and you're like, yeah, but almost every character on the Authority you would never want to spend more than 30 seconds with. Like, these were horrible people, but you were reading it because the art is beautiful and it's this big action, but like, they're not good people. And I mean, to further prove this, one of them's a villain in the new Superman movie. Like, I think that kind of goes without saying. The Engineer, just in case anybody didn't know. So like, she's working with Lex Luthor. So yeah, I mean, like, this was just, like, just further punches if you grew up liking it. And I will say this, I mean, I'm going to keep referencing old episodes, so if you haven't listened to these, go back and listen to them. When we did our whole Silver Age retrospective, I actually went back trying to find where Lightning Lad and Sunboy were so evil that would justify what they were doing in 5 years later, and it's just not there. Like,
yeah, even not even evil, right? But just being a kind of a teenage dickwad, right? You don't really see it.
Well, like, the worst character in Silver Age is Brainiac 5. Not even a question mark. Like, he is so sexist. It's just like, wow. And they didn't even turn him that bad when they were doing anything. Right. So I don't get it. Luckily for Garth Ranzz, they rebooted the Legion. He comes back as Livewire. He's still a bit of a jerk, but he's not like a horrible jerk. I think they struggled a little bit with him on the reboot, and you can talk to this more than I can. I read it as a reread, and I like they kept trying to put him and Saturn Girl together, and it just didn't work in a lot of cases.
Yeah.
And then they have him leave the team, and they're constantly throwing stuff for him to kind of get over, and he does. And I think that and I think you could see him growing over the course of the reboot. So he actually ends up being a really good character by the time we get to Legion Lost, which we talked about last episode, and he makes that big sacrifice, and it felt right, like it was a good choice for what his character had gone through. So what's your take on the reboot, uh, Livewire?
Oh, definitely better. I mean, yeah, I wouldn't. I think I'd more describe him as impulsive
Yes.
than anything else, right? That would be kind of my go to for that one. Certainly doesn't view himself as a leader, but I agree. And I think the first 2 years, they very specifically arced out that first 2 years in a very specific way, right? So Garth gets kind of kicked off the team, but that's the way to bring Ayla as into the team as Spark, right? And then the events happen. You get the Daxamite War, and then there's the whole drama with the UP president at the time, with the Starfinger story that happens. That's in my opinion a good retelling of the story, better than the original. And then eventually you get to a point where he does find his brother Mech, and it's his own brother who he blows off his arm. He blows off Garth's arm, and so that's how the reboot Garth gets his robotic arm, and then he and Ayla defeat Mech, who then kind of goes crazy for a good bit of time. The interesting thing about the reboot Garth is that they said very specifically, we can't, if you decide to regrow your arm, you're going to lose your powers. So Garth at this point is very specifically saying, you know what, I'm gonna own my disability and keep it that way. I can be the hero that the Legion needs me to be. And then as we move forward into the reboot time frame before we get to Legion Lost, there's also the moment where half the team gets split and sent into the 20th century. When that happens, Garth is effectively the de facto leader of the team for a while before they hold elections, and then Invisible Kid, I believe, is the elected leader. And Garth, to his credit, he doesn't want the job, but he does a decent job of doing it, and I think that shows a much, I guess, a higher degree of respect for the character of Livewire in this case from the writers. But then, the team comes back together. He and Imra reunite. It is a forced romance. That I can't deny that. I mean, like I said, I think I mentioned this last episode as well. There is this really weird jonesing that all these writers had to have Saturn Girl be with literally anybody else other than Livewire. But that I think there were too many people that were saying, "Stop touching this third rail, make it happen." And of course, they made it happen, but it didn't seem very natural. But then we get to Legion Lost, and when we talked about this last week, the sacrifice of Garth at the very end is the best part of the story. Not in a way of, oh my god, isn't that cool? It's like it's fulfilling from a heroic story perspective, and if, to a large extent, a growth journey, right? Because Garth is finally at this point where he's like, I know what I have to do, and I know what I know what has to happen in order to do it. So I'm resigning from the Legion so that I can't be considered a killer and then be kicked off the team. The Legion doesn't kill, so I'm not going to be a Legionnaire if that's what this is going to take. So it's a very powerful moment, and it really works.
Yeah, I mean, to reference back what I mentioned when he died in the Silver Age story and how there's just nothing there. In Legion Lost, he gets everything. Like he gets the like that's the moment that you want to see when the hero sacrifices themselves. He hits every beat. It is it's about as well written as Garth Ranzz is ever written
Yep.
during the Legion runs.
And then we never see him again. So let's move on to the next thing.
I mean, I think we can. I mean, yeah, he comes back as like Crystalline Element Lad, which, I mean, not my bag, but I get why they're trying to do it. Then with Three Boot, he's back as one of the original Legionnaires, but you don't really see him for the first 2 years until the Dominator War hits, and they bring Mech back.
Well, you do. He's around. He's around, but he's not in a very. He's not. He's certainly not front and center. You know, he's not even in the. I don't think he's barely in the first issue. So there's that piece of it. We also in the Three Boot, as we've mentioned before, we never understand why the Legion comes together in the first place. So we don't have the same origin story that we have in every other version, where the original Legion Trinity saves R.J. Brand. So there's that whole thing, right? But eventually he does become the Legion leader.
Yeah, and so it's funny when he's not the Legion leader, he's in a happy relationship with Saturn Girl. That kind of stuck. He has some really kind of nice moments with Mech. That sort of stuck. They don't really ever show him with his sister, which is odd. But it's my big criticism of Three Boot is they're just trying to throw so much stuff into it, and they're just moving so quickly that tons of stuff gets missed. And I think a lot of the Lightning Led stuff gets missed there. And then when Jim Shooter takes over, the first thing he does is he's like, "Hey, okay, cool, you're the leader. Let's make it so Ultra Boy and Saturn Girl hook up." And then a woman we say at least 15 years older starts throwing herself at Lightning Lad in just one of the creepiest moments of Legion history.
It's very odd. I mean, they have the whole thing where, and I don't know if this is Shooter going back and revisiting stuff from the 70s, where, you know, as he is leader, Lightning Lad is extremely overwhelmed. He doesn't know how to do the job. There's a whole thing where Ayla is basically like saying, "Poor brother, you know, you don't know what you got yourself into." And he's literally crying at his desk. I think it's it's just horrible. And then yeah, because of a lot of this stuff, I think Imra starts to feel neglected, and then somehow finds herself necking with Ultra Boy in the closet, which is like, oh, come on, guys. And then there's the whole thing with I can't remember if she's the UP president or just the Earth president. But yeah, that whole thing started to get weird before, thankfully, the whole Three Boot run kind of ended.
Yeah, and thankfully is the right word. So it's yeah. By that point, it was just lots of head scratching and going like, why are you doing this?
Yeah.
I will say I think we can skip through a lot of the next bits of Legion runs, because I think they kind of kept Lightning Lad a little in the background. The next big kind of controversial bit that I just want to call out is during the Bendis run, when Lightning Lad and Lightning Lass changed race.
Yeah,
and they were rebooted as
they race swapped them to be, I guess, black, right? I mean, they're not. We can't call them African Americans because they're not in American.
Exactly.
So yeah, so they're basically black characters at this point, which is, on one hand, fine. On another hand, it's like, okay, well, are you just making them Black Lightning? What are you doing here? What's going on? But yeah, there are other little weird things about this particular continuity. There wasn't any, as far as we know, there wasn't any Mech Ranzz, so they didn't have a rogue older brother. And then Ayla was, I never could tell whether she was Lightning Lass or Light Lass. There seemed to be kind of things seem to be kind of all over the place with that, and I just wasn't sure what was going on, to be honest with you.
I think that sentence, "I just wasn't sure what was going on," could really describe a lot of the Bendis era. So I think if we just leave it at that, I'm with you on that take. I will say this: I don't care about race swapping in the slightest, if it's done well and there's a reason for doing it. It was sort of odd that they chose the Lightning related character to race swap, so we had Black Lightning in the future. And there's a part of me that goes, was that done because Black Lightning was on TV and they thought maybe they'd get more eyes on it? Or was it done?
I wonder.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's just, yeah, I'll be honest. Like, all these characters were created in the 60s when everybody had to be white. So the idea of just saying, hey, you know what, let's make, I'm cool. Like what it's like the reboot Phantom Girl. Is it Phantom Girl who's Asian? No, well, Atom Girl, obviously. Like Shrinking
Yeah, I
Violet
think
became
Adam
Asian
Girl
in
seems to be.
reboot.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and I was like,
To
like
your
whatever.
point,
Like
to your point though, it's like, they did the same thing with Shrinking Violet, right? She's
yeah,
I don't think she's black in the same sense, but she definitely has a darker complexion and a very different look. And I thought it was kind of badass because she kind of looked like Storm from X-Men, and
yeah.
but she never did anything. So you're like, okay, whatever. So much for that.
As long as she
So
wasn't
yeah, so
just
I mean,
sitting in the
that's
background
fine.
in big
Do
size.
something with the character, for God's sake.
Yeah. And that's the thing. Like if you do something with the character and it makes sense and it works, I have zero problem with that. Like, um, I don't want to go too off because as we said, we're going to try to do an hour. But I mean, we could rant about this on a whole bunch of stuff. I'm just going to go back to like when we look at Lightning Lad and we look at everything that he's gone through and all these changes. He's one of those characters with the Legion that seems to be the least protected, if that makes any sense. Like,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
you're not changing Saturn Girl's design, you're not changing Cosmic Boy, but yeah, we can play with Lightning Lad. Like, we can do whatever we want with him. And same like with their names, right? Like Saturn, she's got to be Saturn Girl, he's got to be Cosmic Boy, but we'll call him Livewire.
Yeah.
And
Which,
and and
which was
it all comes
which
back
was
to,
kind of a weird choice because the Superman team in the '90s created a villain called Livewire, which that was like, okay, what are you doing? You know what I mean? Don't make it
yeah.
more confusing than it already is.
Yeah, but and so he's always been that character that just hasn't gotten the respect that I think a lot of other Legionnaires have gotten, especially when you consider he's one of the big three. Now, I will say
Yeah.
this, the one place where he did get respect and he's above everybody else is he's the only character now who you can buy an action figure for with that big McFarlane Toys DC multiverse series that's
No
been going
kidding.
on. I think it's in their fourth year. Like there's like 60 different versions of Batman, and there's like characters like you can buy a Captain Carrot toy, you can buy an Ambush Bug one, and I know that because I have it. But yet Lightning Lad's the only Legionnaire, and I remember seeing that announcement. I was like, wow! Like of all the Legionnaires you could have picked, he was the one. And in a, I don't know if this is a good thing or a bad thing. You can actually change between the white head and the black head.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so it's a weird. I mean, I get why they did it, and I get the whole look, and I actually, believe it or not, I've stared at the store going, should I buy it? Should I not buy it? Will my wife kill me if I buy it? Like it's that sort of thing.
They're basing it off of the original promo art of the Bendis boot because the very first copy that came out showed that Lightning Lad being white, and then they changed him to
Okay.
black later on. So who knows?
So I don't know. I mean, I always go with the, you know, like let's be honest. He's got that amazing we keep saying that amazing Dave Cockrum costume from the early
Great.
70s. He's got this very distinct look. He's one of the few, I'll say he's one of the few redheads in comics that for the most part didn't get, I mean, it seems like every redhead in the DC universe got turned into somebody who only cared about having sex. So that was a nice thing they didn't do to him. Sorry, I'm just going with Wally West and Roy Harper and some of those bad 80s and 90s issues, or even more recent with Roy Harper. That's just horrible. It's just that it's that distinct look. So I'm kind of glad that they did this, but I just wish they could actually do it in that comic, to be honest.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, absolutely. I mean, to an extent. I mean, I think they took Black Lightning and in some character designs of Black Lightning, he looks a lot very similar to Lightning Lad, right? So the costume itself is very iconic. I think, especially with the the ones with the larger lightning bolts going down the front of the costume. I mean, it's just really
True,
really great.
true. He's one of the only Legionnaires that I think survived the 70s without having a moment of pure cringe,
Yeah,
costume wise.
yeah, exactly.
And who knows, like, and maybe that's one of those things, like, I sit there as we're talking about this, and I will continue to defend him because I wonder if that was it. Like, I'm a kid in the 70s. I start reading the Legion. I'm like, wow, he looks so cool without making any other connection. Whereas maybe that's why I care a little bit less about the Legionnaire. If they, well, I've never been a fan of Matter Eater Lad's costume. Maybe that's part of it. I don't
No,
know.
but
I think it was just
I
because he
think
wasn't
there's
there.
something to what you're saying there because it is a very eye-catching costume. Just as Saturn Girl's costume in the 70s was, right? In its own way,
Yep.
right? As
Yep.
I've mentioned before. But yeah, it's very distinct and it tends to stand out on the page just because of the combination of the white, the blue, the yellow, and then you have Garth being a redhead. It makes it it just makes it kind of pop.
Yeah, and I think as well, like when the lightning effects are done well, they really stand out too. Like I think of some of those great Keith Giffen images, like Great Darkness Saga, or um, like the lightning looks so good
Oh,
that.
Barry Kitson made it look really good
Oh,
on the page.
yes, yes, that's another one. You can have so much fun with this character, and I think
Yeah.
that's you kind of go back and you think this is a shame that they haven't done more with him, that there isn't more
Mhm.
there. Okay, so when we talk about these characters, when we do these spotlights, we always like to talk about uh, which characters are they closest. They have the closest connection to. So obviously, with Lightning Lad, it's his wife, Saturn Girl. It's his sister. We'll go with Lightning Lass. Although, again, as we said, I think Cosmic Boy as well. There's always been that great connection. Is there anybody else you can think of that he's?
I mean, I think you mentioned all the really big ones. And we also mentioned that in that SW6 batch, he was buddies with Dirk Morgna, aka Inferno, aka Sunboy. But that wasn't a great relationship. His brother Mech, right? I think there is an important relationship there, even though Mech is generally speaking a villain. In both the 5 years later version and in the latter half of the reboot under Abnett and Lanning, there was even though I don't think that Mech ever reconnected with Garth after he returned. There was always an interesting relationship and dynamic between the two of them, even though it tended to be more oppositional and antagonistic. It was still an interesting dynamic.
Correct me if I'm wrong, because I'm going to blur together in my mind a bunch of these versions, but it was the reboot where Garth goes from kind of worshiping his brother and wanting to spend time with him, realizing then that he's a villain, and then that great moment where he stands up to him, and the character development with that I thought was excellent.
Yep.
Am I right on that?
Yep.
I'm not mixing up the versions, right?
No, no, that I believe. Yeah, I'm tracking that all being in the reboot, and then you have Mech at the end also. In the end, right? Because there was some ambiguity whether or not he was going to remain kind of a villain or keep this turn to be rehabilitated. At the end, you find out that Mech has been kind of hero worshiping Garth, which is kind of an interesting twist, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's a really good point for both of those characters. Just that, the brother relationship and the little brother getting out of the older brother's shadow and all of these different things you can play with. And I thought that's one of the highlights of the reboot, especially with Lightning Lad. So, I mean, obviously we're going to say that, anybody who's going to get into the region or the Legion, the Legion has to read Lightning Lad stories. So what would you recommend as sort of you think are the best or your favorites or the ones that really show this character for who he is?
I mean, obviously Legion Lost. I mean, I think that's got to be on there. Even though it's not that great of a story, or neither of are that great of stories from a Lightning Lad perspective. We mentioned that Volume 3, issue number 45, is very centric to to Lightning Lad, as well as the Legionnaires 3 story. Again, we've talked about all three of these characters in the first dozen episodes of this podcast. Absolutely read the Legionnaires 3 miniseries. Very, very good. The wedding issue, the collector's edition C55, that's always something that you should read. It's a fun story. And a landmark wedding issue. Those would be the ones that that jump out at me, that I would say definitely go out and read those.
Yeah, one for me, and I think it's because I was I mean, look, it's not hard to say, like, when Paul Levitz takes over the second time with Legion 284, up until the end of the Great Darkness saga, I think Lightning Lad gets this great arc of, his wife ends up stuck on an asteroid with Timberwolf, and they don't know what's going on, and he feels like he's losing control of the Legion. And yes, it's a depressing story because he's essentially going, I don't want to say going crazy, but he's losing control of what he's doing. And I thought the little bits of what they did with him, it was a really nice play for Lightning Lad. And look, these are excellent comics to read anyways, but from Lightning Lad perspective, I think they do a good job with him. And as I mentioned before, the reboot, a lot of the reboot stuff, when they're focusing on his growth, there are moments where he comes across as just a jerk, but by the end of that run, and especially when he steps up as leader, I think it's really nice too.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so how about the worst stories?
Well, we already mentioned them, but I'm just going to say again, don't read 5 years later. The whole thing from start to the they just, they're kicking him when he's down, and they just keep kicking him. And it's just, if you like Lightning Lad, it's just painful to read, especially that annual number 3. Just skip all of that.
The annual number 3, and although honestly, I hate that Legionnaires, that early Legionnaire story where they have the tryouts. That I loathe that story with like every fiber of my being, because he ends up, just because of all the behavior. Not only is he a jerk, and I can't remember if this is in the same story or one either before or after, but he ends up sending Cosmic Boy to the hospital. I mean, it's just, they just portray him very, very badly in that series, and I'm not here for it. I'm just like, bye. I'm not reading you again if I can help it.
I hate to say this, that entire Legionnaires run is painful from start to finish. So even ignoring the Lightning Lad parts, that entire thing up until the reboot is just such a hot and really aggravating. Like, as fans of the characters, you kind of want to reach into the comic and just smack these kids around. They're so horrible to everybody. And I just don't understand. Like, I just don't get it. Like, I don't understand why they did it. So I would just
it's very similar to when you mention it like that. It very much reminds me of the 3-boot Legion. I felt the same way about that. I'm like, just God, I don't care if you're trying to be realistic kids or not. Just stop being jerks, for God's sake.
Yeah.
Anyway,
and it's one of those where it's like, okay, I get when I was 15 years old, I probably wasn't the nicest person on the planet, and we have kids who have lived through those teenage years, and I'm sure there were moments when you just wanted to grab them and be like, stop.
Oh, but they're beyond their teenage moments, and I'm still feeling like that. So
yeah, but I don't want to read about teenagers who are so bad that I would tell my own teenage child, like, don't hang out with these kids. They're horrible. And that's where we are.
I'd read a Guy Gardner comic if I wanted to read that. Right. So
exactly. So, and then I'd wait for Batman to punch him in the nose, and I'd be like, yes. And that would be my favorite. That'd be my favorite moment. Okay. Last question as we kind of wrap up looking at Lightning Lad is, where do you, how would you want him to be used moving forward? Like, we know a Legion reboot is coming, or at least fingers crossed, that's where we're moving towards. Where do you want to see him with the Legion in the future?
I mean, he doesn't even necessarily have to be a leader. It'd be great. I mean, especially if we could do fan leader polls, that would be fantastic. But he doesn't need to be a leader, but he does need to be, if he's a founder, he needs to be like like a professor or president emeritus kind of character, right? Where he's part of the group that everybody looks up to as a direction, right? He has to lead by example, and he can have his brash moments, right? Like we were talking about Livewire in Legion Lost last week. He can be brash and have his own personality, but he still needs to be a touch point and a mentor for the younger crowd that are coming on board.
I agree. I think so. First of all, is he has to be a central character of this team, right? And he
Mm-hmm.
has to be with Saturn Girl. And part of the responsibility of that is that you have to give an audience the reason why these two are together and make it believable, right? I think a big flaw for a lot of different writers have just said these two are together, but then he's a jerk, and then you keep wondering why she's putting up with him.
Yeah, right.
I think they have to, so he can be brash and he can be a bit of a dum dum and he can make mistakes, but at the end of the day, like, you can't doubt that he's here for the team, and he's the one. Like, if he's the character who always is leaping in without thinking, or he's the one who's quick to action, or he's even the leader of the team that goes in, first strike, like that, I
Mm-hmm.
think would be a good way. But I really like what you just said about him being the mentor and him being the person who the young talent kind of go to. And as soon as you said that, I mean, I know I do too many sports metaphors already on this podcast, but I always think of, like, when you have that championship team, you have to have that one person who's been there before, and they don't necessarily have to be the best player, but they have to be the person who you can go and talk to. So they're not the
Yeah.
leader and they're not the smartest person and they're not, but and I think if you played him that way, I think that would be a great use for him, as that is kind of the grizzled veteran, as much as the Legion can have that. But
Yeah, it's not
um,
even, I wouldn't even call it a grizzled veteran. I'd say it's just more a lot in the business world today, right? There's a lot of people talk about, especially industrial psychologists, really talk about corporate culture or team culture, right? In the case of a sports team, it's team culture. What's the mindset of, how people act and behave, and that is typically communicated by the people who have been around for a while, right? And if he's a founder, he's going to be one of the people that says, I helped set the rules here. I'm going to lead by example. I'll have my moments. I can be, I might have a jerk moment here or there, but it's never going to be to the point of, demeaning somebody or anything like that. I'm going to show you how to behave. If you're going to be part of this super team, superheroes, right? We got to live up to every word in this team name.
I like that. I also like the fact that you're coming in with the much smarter examples from business, whereas I just stick to sports. So we
Well,
know who the smart
theoretically, that
person
should
on this
work in sports as
podcast
well. So,
is. I'm just trying to give you a compliment on this one.
yeah,
So
well, thank you. Thank you.
the one other thing that I want to go with, that I want to see, is I want to actually see a brother-sister relationship. Like, I
Yeah,
think there's moments where they pull it off, but there's so many times in the Legion where, especially twins, like, you would think, like, I'd love to see, like, little goofy moments of, say, like, like them knowing exactly what the other person is going to do, or them, or one of them finishes the other person's sentence. Like, I know normally we do that in romantic bits, but, like, show the bond between the two of them. Something where you get the sense that these two are connected at a deeper level than anybody else would be.
yeah. I mean, I think the reboot did a pretty decent job of them as just a regular brother sister, right? Before he died, of course, but I think a lot of that is really kind of cool, especially from a culture where actual twins are kind of the norm from a birth perspective.
Yeah, I'd love to see stuff like that. I'd love to see those connections. And I think if they followed through with that, I think that would be a great step forward. Okay. Is there anything else that we missed? Anything about Lightning Lad that we should be talking about?
I think we covered. I think we covered a lot of it, actually.
I think so as well. I think we got through a lot of his history. And I mean, I guess if I have just one more thing, kind of one message here, it's just that Like this is one of those examples of a character that you just want to see them do more of. Like, and you go back through the issues and you're like, I wish they, here's a moment or here's something. And um, because he's one of my favorites. I really like Lightning Lad as a character, and so seeing more of him, or seeing more of this character used would always be a good thing.
I agree. Okay, well, let's close the Lightning Lad discussion for now, at least. And in the meantime, we do have some mail.
Email.
We got actually one email. So kind of like what Jay was alluding to earlier, we're on a little bit of a more of an aggressive recording path right now. So we're getting emails from all kinds of past episodes, and other comments. But we did get an email in from Matthew Elmsley, who runs the awesome Legion Abstract blog, and again, highly recommend it. We'll put the link in there for you guys on the show notes, and he responds regarding our Legion Mount Rushmore episode, and Matthew says, "Good episode as always. If I was picking similar quarters, I would have gone Levitz, Shooter, Wade, Siegel, and Fort, Giffen, Cockrum, Kitson, or maybe Giffen, Cockrum, Kitson, Coypel, myself. But one thing about the Legion that it's had a ridiculous number of wonderful artists, far too many to properly honor," and 100% agree with you, Matthew. And I know that we're not talking about quote-unquote great artists here, but the ones who shaped the nature of the Legion over the decades, which not everybody did. But I'm curious whether I can get these lists to 10. So he has a bunch of folks here, which is kind of cool. So the great first rank of Legion artists. So we have Cockrum, Quapel, Fort, Giffen, Grell, Kitson, Moy, Sherman, Sook, and Swan. Good list there. And then the second rank, his next tier down there, is Chris Batista. Great choice. Yildre Sinar, Stuart Immonen, Phil Jimenez, Greg LaRoque, Steve Lytle, Francis Manapul, Lee Motor, Francis Portillo, the most beautiful Legion art ever, and Chris Sprouse. Another really good list there, actually. And then the 10 great Legion artists who might not get mentioned in a top 10, but deserve to. We have Pat Broderick, Dennis Calero, Jeff DeCal, Mike Godolewski, Al Plastino, Riley Rossmo, Alex Serra, Gus Storms, Steve Yui, I guess. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that right. And then Pete Woods. And keep up the good work. Thank you, Matthew. Appreciate the feedback, as always. And then we also did get some Blue Sky comments here as well. Again, I'm not ready to go. That was awesome.
I was going to say, as you're looking for this, I was thinking from that comment, do we need a pyramid? Do we need an art pyramid where we go,
seriously.
Okay, here's this, because I mean, he is 1,000% correct. The number of good artists that have worked on the Legion, like to prepare for that episode, I was looking over these and I was like, I'm just trying to think of a name that really, yeah, like, so for example, like Greg LaRoque, who I loved his work on the Legion. Like, I think it was awesome. And he was those names. And I don't even know if we really talked about him when we were talking about this.
Yeah.
Or
no, for sure. For sure.
Yeah. Or a lot of them, or Pete Woods is another one. Like, I like looking over his stuff and it's so good. And there's so much energy and so much, like the action that he brings is just awesome. And yeah, we didn't get a chance to talk about them, or we didn't speak about James Sherman enough, and I think we could have gone 20 minutes on him. Who's on? Jimmy James, who's one of my personal favorites, and I know and we're going to talk about him more next episode. But it's there's so many guys that just kind of blow your mind on this. Chris Sprouse, his stuff is brilliant. Oh, yeah. Sorry, I could.
I mean, Chris Sprouse, he basically defined the look of the Legion in the 90s. For all intents and purposes, from a design perspective.
Or Jason Pearson, who we didn't. I was he on the list that you read? I probably, and I just didn't hear it because I was thinking about other names. Him taking it from Giffen on the 5 year later and bringing his own style to that. Yeah, like just so much amazing talent.
Yep. And then on Blue Sky, where you can reach us at longlivethelegion.bsky.social. Chris on Infinite Earths, he's catching up on the podcast, so he really enjoyed the Universo project episode that we did. So good feedback there. And then let me see. So he listened to the third podcast. It was a lot of fun. Always the best sidekick while doing dishes. Thank you. We appreciate that. And I also met Saturn Girl during her pink bikini era, and I loved it right away. As a kid, I wondered why people didn't wear those clothes on the street. I agree with that. I totally agree with that. And then the fourth episode, so much fun. I love exploring the Legion's relationships. You mentioned the asteroid where some Legionnaires got stranded. I guess that's my favorite Legion issue of all time. I always thought Imra and Bryn would have kissed if it wasn't for Ayla's and Dawnstar's arrival. I mean, that issue is always one of those. I think it's an iconic issue just because of that cover and the cold and lonely corner of hell text on the front there. I think it's one of those. It's one of those Legion covers that always comes to mind when you think of the Legion.
And it's one of those issues. I'm sorry, I was going to say it's the issue that I really think tells you that things are different.
Yeah.
Right. Like when Levitz takes over, he's kind of slowly getting into it, but then that issue is the moment where you go, okay, we're in a new world now. Giffen's firing on all cylinders by this point, and it's we could almost do an entire episode on that one.
Oh, for sure. And then even as we're recording here, Chris had another comment. He caught up with episode 5. He said, yet another interesting podcast. There's so much to talk about, but I'll just stick with my absolute belief that the monthly format is completely outdated and it alienates new readers from joining. The Legion would do great in larger formats, even if it got published every 3 or 6 months. So that's a really interesting comment. And thanks, Chris, for all the great comments here. I'm really wondering about this myself because I've been finding from a reading perspective, I've been heavy on the DC app this last couple of weeks, catching up on all the Absolute stuff. The new Supergirl series is great. Highly recommend reading that. And I wonder, with a team as large as the Legion, can we do this on a monthly schedule? What's the best way to have this work? We'll have to see.
Yeah, I mean, I think we've had this conversation before, and I keep going back to just the whole thought of why are we still following the monthly format? Like it's such a product of a bygone era, and that's not how people consume content anymore. I would think it would be, either DC does big projects where they say, okay, we're going to do like a graphic novel a year, or they do like use the app and just say, hey, we're going to pump out like 5 pages a week or whatever is a doable amount. And just see what kind of response we get. Like, see how many readers they're getting. So if they're getting, like if people are on the app going, yeah, I want to see this, I'm getting, X number, let's just say 7 pages every 2 weeks, like something like that. And if you're getting 20,000 people reading this, you're like, okay, we know what our audience is. Let's keep going. Yeah, I think they have to start thinking of different ways to get this stuff out there.
Yeah, for sure. And I don't know, I'd be the last person you want to talk to from a comic book economics perspective, but with things like the DC Infinite app, that's money they already have, right? Even though they publish out, depending on what tier you are on, at the very soonest a month late. And some, there's a couple exceptions that are on time with actual release, but they're kind of rare. It's money they already get digitally from the digital perspective. So I don't know how that combined with the traditional comic books sales kind of mesh all into that. But yeah, you're right. From the, they're getting data from the views on the app, and how they use that data is that would be a great question. And I would think also, they can see who's reading what, how often, things like that. And for me, my own habits are, I'll go through a period where I'll read a bunch of stuff every couple of weeks. Kind of like, even if I had my own box at the comic book store, right? I'd probably collect it all every couple of weeks, read through it when I could. I do the same thing on the app.
Yeah, and I think it's I think gone are the days of wanting to have 22-page stories and being limited by that. And I think that's the other thing they have to think about, especially with all the manga out there and how that's taken over, like why not approach that? Like, why not say, hey, there's obviously an audience like everybody has mentioned, I've heard these comments over and over again, like My Hero Academia and how, that's how they should be doing the Legion. And I was thinking, like, why don't they just lean into that fully and just say, hey, we're going to do not as great paper, black and white. It's going to be the Legion. We're going to have, we're going to kind of copy that sort of design and make it so it appeals to the audience that we're looking for. And instead of putting out 22 pages a month, we're going to, I mean, what's the average manga? Like 150? I don't even know. Sorry.
I don't even know either. It's not my jam, as they say.
Yeah, we're going to do this and it's going to cost $12 or whatever it is. And we're going to, like, we're not going to have these insanely complicated backgrounds. We're not going to have, like, we're just going to tell stories and that's going to be the focus. And so I will just say at the end of this, if there's anybody from DC Comics who's listening to this podcast, we are more than happy to sit down and talk to you about this. We've got a ton of ideas, even if we don't know the economics.
Yeah, because it's, I mean, the other thing that I don't think really works for me is the whole writing for the trade way of doing things, right? Because you never really get fulfilled by an individual comic book anymore. You have to collect 5 of them. So I'm like, okay, well, why don't I just wait until you release the whole thing, so I won't pay you any money until you release the final story, right? So I don't know.
That was my unfortunate dealing with the Bendis run, is that I said, I know he's going to write for a trade, so I'm just going to pre-order the trades. And then I get the first one and I was like, well, I don't know if I want the second one now, but I've already pre-ordered it. Because like, why buy these individual issues anymore when you know they're going to do this? And I would be fascinated to see what the sales numbers look like. And because it's got to be cheaper to only publish them one time.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. So again, who knows? Yeah, we just went off on another tangent there, but I think it's something we have to think about with the Legion.
Tangent,
yeah. Yep, I agree. Right. And the other one I was thinking as well, like, if you have, whether it's on the Universe app or if it's a trade paperback or whatever, you have a reference right there. So if you're reading the book and you're like, I don't know who this character is. So if it's a big graphic novel, you just flip to the front 2 pages and you're like, oh, that's, that's Block and he's this and these are his powers. Yeah. And then the readers are immediately, they never like get out of the story. They never leave it. And on the Ultimate, or, you could just click that person's name and it would open in another tab. Like, you could build that in. Anyways, we could talk about this for another 20 minutes, and I don't think anybody wants to hear that. So let's wrap this up, because I think we did all that, and I'm just going to say to everybody, please keep sending emails. Please keep leaving comments on Blue Sky, or I'm now posting this on Reddit. So leave the comments there. We love to hear these, and if you do have an email for us, our email address is longlivethelegion2025@gmail.com. We love to read your comments, so the more the better. But where can everybody find you on the internet?
I was just going to say, I have my Legion Reviews website at jimboslegion.blogspot.com, where I emphasize try to post 1 new comic a week that is somehow Legion related, and I'm way behind, but I'm getting there. You can find me personally on Blue Sky at jimbofett.bsky.social. I'm on Reddit at JimboFett87 and on Discord as Jimbo Fett on the Legion Fan Club Discord, as well as the Certain POV Discord.
Yes. And you can find me, same with the blog where I do my weekly reviews, at jmlonglivethelegion.blogspot.com. You can find me at Blue Sky at jmckiernan.bsky.social. You can find me on Reddit or on Discord at Drake Burrows. Again, this is why I keep talking about Wildfire. And I will say this about the Legion Discord. I mentioned this last episode. I'm going to mention this again. Please come join us in the Legion fan club. It's so great to see you. And I'm going to mention this as well. I didn't mention this last week because, Jim, you mentioned it. The Certain Point of View podcast network, and they've got a Discord server as well. Please come check us out there. There's a lot of other great podcasts I will just say this, like I just got into something called Another Pass where they watch old movies and they talk about how they can
Love
fix
this
them.
podcast. I love
And
it so much.
it's been a yeah, it's because and it's one of those like we've seen comments where like you start yelling at your podcast because you want to join in the conversation, and that's where I am, especially if they're talking about they're talking about movies that maybe I didn't like so much. I'm like, yeah, they should have done that, or yeah, that's a mistake, or it's definitely
The Star Trek 5 episode was really good.
Well, it's kind of funny. I was listening to one of the recent ones on Captain America, the First Avenger, and I was like, what are you going to say? Like the movie's great. And and they're kind of, and I think that's good as well. Like kind of struggling to fix movies that actually work. So definitely worth checking these out. Otherwise, I think we're going to wrap up for today. I'm going to tell everybody our next episode, just so that you can prepare if you want to get on the DC Universe app and read these comics before we do this. We are going to read the Reflecto saga.
God help us.
So this is considered one of the worst stories in Legion history. So you're going to get to listen to me unironically defend a bad Legion story because it's one of my childhood favorites. And I know Jim's going to be rolling his eyes and drinking. Are we going bourbon, scotch? It's going
to be bourbon for sure. Yeah. And so you'll get to hear Jim get plastered out of his mind while we go through the Reflecto saga. So it'll be good. I will be reading this out of the Legion of Superheroes Before the Darkness Volume 2 Omni. So yes, it'll be a good time for everybody.
Yeah, what is it? Legion of Superheroes Volume 2, issues 273 to 282. So if you want to check those out before this, and you can join in and you can roll your eyes and have whatever alcoholic or recreational pharmaceutical you require to get through that series.
And the
otherwise,
bourbon of choice will be Angel's Envy. So there we are. So
there we go. Oh, good.
So very good. And so until next time, when we start talking about the different ways that Ultra Boy can die, we will talk to you next time. And long live the Legion.
Long live the Legion.
Video games are a unique medium.
They can tell stories,
Immerse us in strange, fantastic worlds.
blur the very boundaries of our reality.
But at the end of the day, video games are fun. Whatever fun is to you.
I'm Jeff Moonen,
And I am Matt, aka Stormageddon.
and on Fun and Games, we talk about the history, trends, and community of video games.
It's a celebration of all the games we play and all the fun we find within them.
And there's so many more games out there, so we hope you'll share in that conversation with us.
Fun and Games podcast with Matt and Jeff. Find us on certainpov.com or wherever you get your podcasts.
And happy gaming.